it's a very simple model, and very simply explained very simply. I think the idea is that the brain has different component parts, and they function in different ways. And I think we're all quite comfortable with the fact that we've got our vital organs which all do different things, but all work together in our torso to keep us alive. And if you take that analogy to the brain, you've got different parts of the brain, and there's one part of the brain which is the limbic system, which is very, very old system, which is responsible purely for emotional thinking. So it has no logic, doesn't think of consequences, it's just pure emotion. And then there's a frontal lobe, which basically is where you have you, the person, as it were, with logic, consequence, emotions, theory of mind, etc. And then there's a parietal lobe, which is like a blank computer at birth, and it's where you programming behaviours and skills, for example. So if you imagine getting into a car for the first time, we've all tried to learn to drive, and it all seems impossible the first time you get in the car, and lo and behold, 6 months later you're driving a car, you're texting at the same time, and you're on the phone, how's that work, And it's work because your parietal lobe's driving the car for you, you don't have to think. And I think from a sporting point of view, that's the zone. So people talk quite a lot about the zone and flow and all these kind of things, but in actual fact, if that part of the brain is allowed to run your system, and you can keep the chimp out and you can keep the human out of the way, then you're in business, and that's what we try and do basically. So the chimp, as an emotional sort of, a good example of chimp is that you've got these two sorts of systems going on at the same time. You've got the emotional thought, and then the logical side in conversation. But you get an emotional offer first, and then the logic kicks in. So I think, if we've all been there sitting at our desk with a computer and in front of an email, and so you get an email and you read it and you think, oh, right, I'll show you. And off we go. And then 10 minutes later you sit there going, I can't believe I sent that email. And in our world, you didn't. You chimped it,
Yes.
And I think that for us is a really, really important part. So in sporting terms, our chimps, if you like, we'll think of consequences. So we'll be worried about what happens if I win, what happens if I lose, what will I look like. It's a threat if you go into a performance environment, and your ego's at stake, etc., etc. And so we try and manage all of that, and make sure that people understand the difference between emotional and logical thinking, and then actually put that into practice in very, very high pressurized situations. Obviously, we don't, the chimp side, the emotional side is rational, and therefore can make very, very instinctive decisions, whereas, logical decisions is where you want to be under pressure. And a good example of that, I think, was when Jason Queally, back in Sydney, he rode the kilo, which is 4 laps of the track. I'm sure you all remember Jason, you won the first gold medal in Sydney. At the time, Arnold Tornon, he hadn't lost for about 3 years, untouchable. This guy it was everybody else was racing for silver and bronze, and Arnold was going to win the gold. Of course, being reigning world champion, he was last off. Jason went 5 to go, got up, posted a fantastic time, brilliant performance. And in the time that they saw Jason's qualifying time, and the time that Arno had to get up and race himself, they changed his gear onto a bigger gear than he'd ever ridden before. And it's interesting because even before Athens, we asked Chris Hoy, Chris, if you're the last guy up and you see the world record being broken, you have to get up there and ride the fastest time you've ever ridden, what are you going to do? And they all go, well, I guess I'd have to go out harder in the first quarter. First lap, I'm going to have to go harder than I've done in the past. And you think, well, let's think about this. We've had over 4 years to think about how to go fastest we possibly can down the track. And in the 5 minutes that it takes between the last guy going off and you getting up there, we've found the magic wasn't. There's something that doesn't quite stack up here, And of course, Arnold Tornon put this big gear on. He got up and he went, he got out and he did a super fast 3 laps, and you could have walked faster than him in the last, coming out to turn 4, and he lost. And it was, there's a great example of the chimp in motion, as it were.
Yes. It's just that very last point about Steve Peters. It was announced in the summer that he